Today we're headed out of town. We're going to mainline Peter Zeihan the entire trip. And then we're going to go through ghost towns in southern Arizona to find out what happens when your economy crumbles on today's Unnamed Real Estate Podcast. Little rule of thumb, don't take economic advice from Circle K clerks. The first stop on our Grand Southern tour is Casa Grande, and in the back you can see the great house of Casa Grande that the town is named out of, even though we're actually in Coolidge. The ancestry of this thing, in the classic terms of real estate, the title is in dispute. Pretty much every tribe within walking distance of this place claims this as the sacred ancestral land of their ancestors. They probably had wars over it, now they have lawsuits over it. All right? But Casa Grande, for whatever reason, still exists as a town. Apparently agriculture is a really big thing down here, although there is a lot of construction going on. And see, as we pass through the southern part of Arizona, we're going to see the economy change from mining and agriculture to light manufacturing to basically just retirement homes, old people trying to find a place to live. Okay? And this is our first stop. So this is possibly one of the oldest buildings in existence in Arizona, possibly the entire country. I don't have the facts and figures right in front of me, although there is this great little thing over here talking about how the Anza expedition and found the Casa Grande ruins as the Spanish explorers came marching up here in search of gold and people to convert to God. So it's one of the great little things about Arizona. There's always somebody trying to tell somebody else what to do. We're now somewhere to the east of Florence. The 79 was detoured and everything like that, and I found a little side road, Kearns Herney or something like that, highway, which is not actual highway at all. It's actually a gravel road. So one of the fun things about the West when you're out here is that you'll see a little gray line on the road, and that could be a 4-lane highway or it could be a sheep track. So we're doing pretty good on this road, but this shot right here I really wanted to stop and take because this shows a really good example in just this one shot, right? Because what you see off here is a old fenced-in area for putting cattle into. You do that for vaccinations or anything else like that. Sometimes you just need to take your cows and put them somewhere useful so you can get at them. We have passed a couple on the road, haven't seen any really big herds, but you know, as you look out onto this, you can see how green it is. I mean, you're definitely not getting the 1 cow and calf per acre that they lease this land out to, okay? You might maybe getting 1 cow and calf, maybe 10, 15 acres out here. And then way off into the distance right here, that gray line you're seeing, that's an actual copper mine. And that's one of the other reasons why people are running around down here. The copper mines are still in production. It's you don't just get copper from going through houses and cutting the pipes out there, meth heads. You can actually go dig it out of the earth. That's a lot of the towns that we're going to be going through is literally from people digging precious stuff up out of the ground. So we're going to continue on the road, and if you've noticed, I've been sitting out here recording this. There's the car, and there has not been a vehicle driven by the entire time. I can't hear anything except the idling of my car and the birds in the distance. I love southern Arizona, especially in the spring when it's all overcast and not 120 degrees. The next stop here is Mammoth, which is not a ghost town, but definitely a town that's seen better days. Any of you guys out there who are looking for a $400 or $500 one-bedroom house to rent, this is where you need to come. Mammoth is dominated by the copper mining industry. I am sitting on the Miners Memorial, and next to me we have a plaque filled with various things of people who have lost their lives mining, which is a suck job. My great-great-grandfather used to be a coal miner in the northeastern part of England. I have a picture of a miner mining those coal mines in my cube in case I ever start sitting there thinking about how bad real estate sucks. I look at that picture and go, hey, at least you're not mining coal in Durham County, England. The other thing that we have going on here is there's a memorial over there, which for some reason is closed, dedicated to the wives and mothers, the women who had to go and they had to do 3 things, right? 2, they had to live with a miner. which sucks. They had to get up in the morning about the same time the husband was getting going, get him out the door with his little lunch pail and stuff. And then when you heard about a mine collapse, you had to sit there and wait to see if your husband came home. I wrote a little story about that. It was almost a poem. I'm going to include that in the show notes below, just because I'm sort of egotistical that way, and I thought it was pretty good. Other thing I wanted to point out is that this place, there is a song that just popped in my head and will not go away. It's called Miner's Lullaby. It was written by a guy by the name of Utah Phillips. I'm also going to include that in the show notes below, because I really do love a good body count disaster song. I swear I'm not Irish, but I do love a good emo everybody does song. So Mammoth today is still a copper mining town, but as copper prices go up and down, so does the economy of Mammoth. And that's one of the problems you have when your primary industry in town is one single mine, factory, or whatever. I did notice on the way down here, there were several trailer courts that were set up almost like little retirement communities. This is where a lot of people like to retire to when they can't afford to retire in Sun City. They find themselves a little single wide out here in the middle of nowhere, and they settle down and listen to the stillness, which honestly does not sound that bad. Although the flag's flying, and that's what you're hearing over this song. Next stop, who knows? We continue our drive south. This is day tour of the Southeastern Arizona tour. We are in Tombstone. I am across the street from the OK Corral. And as you can see, this is a fun little neighborhood and stuff like that. They got a whole bunch of real shady looking people wandering around here and whatnot. And they got a whole bunch of tourists and whatnot looking at the shady people. It makes for an entertaining time. So Tombstone came out about the 1880s or so. It was based on a silver strike that was discovered in the area. Over the course of time, they pulled $40 million, in those times money, out of the Tombstone area. This population of this area grew to over 10,000 people. A lot of them had a lot of things going on. A lot of them decided they wanted to shoot at each other, get drunk. We actually stayed the night in a bordello, which is not as entertaining as you might think. It was actually relatively quiet. I was disappointed. But over the time, the silver paid out, and this place dropped down from 10,000 people to 600 people. Then after a course of time, they decided to start making it a tourist town. And like a lot of historical places in the West, you see these places get a second gasp of life for basically tourism. Because Phoenix is close, and a lot of retirees are down in this area. They come out here and they take a day. This is Wednesday morning, right? And as you can see, Wednesday morning, we still have a lot of tourists wandering around. All the stores are open, all the shops are open. Now on the weekend, this place gets a little crazy. All things considered, with the South, with this area, if you do happen to have a town that does happen to have something historical or hysterical going on in the area, you can turn your economy around by bringing in tourist dollars. And this place is a lot of fun. There's a lot of characters here. This is the kind of town that I'd like to retire into. I want to be the crazy old guy sitting on the bench telling you the stories of, like, we have this building right here. That's where Doc Parter got his leg blown off because he accidentally misfired his shotgun one day when he got drunk. So we're going to continue on. The next stop that we're headed to is going to be Bixby. And then we're going to continue on through to Douglas and then way north. Little last minute update. I am sitting on the stage of the Birdcage Theater in Tombstone. And this is one of the last buildings, one of the original buildings. You can see out onto the floor that is original in Tombstone. This is the backstage area. And Tombstone, when you drop $40 million into any area, you're going to have secondary economies pick up. The north end of town that we've just been through, there was a Chinatown that had laundries and opium dens and probably good takeout, sometimes maybe even delivery. But, it's down here on Allen Street and in places like this where the real money got extracted from miners, right? This was a brothel, it was a theater, it was a bar, it did a little bit of everything. And the guy at the front desk, if you sit there, they do a little free talk about the whole place. And he said that for the prostitutes working upstairs, the charge was $25, which is about 600 and something odd today. So if you can think about that, $600, I mean, it's cheaper to get a Tinder account and take them out on a dinner or something like that. So, but, you know, like I said, they've taken the space. It's now been repurposed as a museum, and still making money for the owners after all these years. Just not with the prostitution side. Things a little bit more legal. Although, looking at some of the prices on the t-shirts, I think they are getting away with robbery. So the next stop on our Great Southeast tour was Bisbee, which is another little former mining town, current mining town, that has been invaded and taken over by yuppies. Very tight little streets filled with people walking around and driving their little hybrids and whatnot, and their Subarus. A lot of boomers in North Face, fleece, and this and that and the other thing. Like a lot of little towns in here, especially the ones that were blessed by being pretty, artists moved into this area, made like a little hippie commune, and then as soon as they turned into their 50s and 60s, decided, hey, let's get rid of that hippie stuff and embrace crass commercialism. So a lot of places you can find the little southwestern artwork and this and that and the other thing. And it's a happening little burg. A lot of little itty-bitty hotels, a lot of various restaurants and whatnot. If you're lucky enough, when your city has played out the mines, you can find something to convert over into. But also, like a lot of places down here on the border and stuff, it's starting to come back. Bisbee is a tourist mecca, strangely enough, right? Part of the reason why we stopped here is because everybody and their dog said, oh my God, you gotta go to Bisbee. So, guys, I went to Bisbee. It looks like every little tourist trap hippie burg in the West. But we continue on to Douglas, border town. And now we're in Douglas. Douglas is on the border with Mexico. That's Mexico. You can see the glorious fence, the glorious wall. There's also a secondary wall, a bunch of barbed wire, this, that, and the other thing. Over my shoulder right here, you can see the port of entry, which is surrounded with a whole bunch of various guys in dark uniforms. And then if you turn around and look at it, this is one of the transfer stations you have down here. One of the interesting things about all these towns down here on the port is actually, if you look at it, it looks like the Mexican side is a little bit nicer than the American side. And part of that is a lot of people go over the border to get dental work done, medical work done, pick up various prescription drugs, this, that, and the other thing. Maybe a couple guys in the back of their car, and then they come across the border. So you get a lot of day shopping down on the south side, and you get a lot of day shopping down up here on the north side. So these little communities in here exist basically because the border exists, right? And it creates a little bit of mini economy. Now, this transfer station is a really good example of that, right? Goods and services, or especially goods, get transferred over the border, and then they get put into these warehouses where they get broken up and then sent off to those various locations and whatnot. Douglas is getting a new port of entry. It's going to be built over here on the south side. All right, and the U.S. Is going to pay for it. But what it's going to do is it's going to allow a lot more vehicle traffic, a lot more truck traffic to come up from Mexico into the U.S. and sometimes even further on that into Canada. There is a major freeway system that is being put in on the other side of Tucson to the west, on the other side of the mountains from Tucson. It's going to come up, pass to the west of Phoenix, and continue on north. Right? There is going to be a lot more surface traffic inside the NAFTA area than you've ever seen before. A lot of this has to do, if you've been listening to Peter Zeihan the entire trip and reading his books when you're not driving, what you realize is that the global economy is sort of recorrecting itself. To take his book and a whole bunch of hours of talking short, Americans are done. We are done being the police officer for the world. We can't afford the United States Navy to patrol the high seas to keep your goods and services getting shipped over here. So you're going to start seeing a lot of breakup. We saw this starting to kick in because of COVID. We first started to hear the word supply chain. Now, a lot of people didn't know what a supply chain was until they suddenly realized they could not get stuff at the grocery store like they were used to. England is getting a very, very good example of what happens when you separate away from Europe, and then all of a sudden you don't have those little treaties that you need to do to have cucumbers in your grocery store. Right? Just do a little Google search on that thing. Right? The world is so incredibly interconnected, and according to Peter Zeihan and a lot of other economists, it is coming apart. The manufacturing center of the world, China, doesn't have enough kids. Right? They're group is aging out. So China is not the cheap place to make things anymore. It's Mexico, right? And it's places further south than Mexico, right? Mexican labor is cheaper and more efficient right now than China is, and you don't have to put it on a cargo container and ship it 8,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean to get to Long Beach, to get it off, to put it on a truck, and then drive it inland so you can pick it up at Walmart, right? It's now getting cheaper to build it down here in Mexico and bring it to these areas right here, and then from here, drive it to your Walmart. This makes Douglas a really, really interesting place to be, all right? Douglas it's an old town. It's like a lot of these towns in the West. When you drive downtown Main Street and stuff like that, it's nothing but boarded windows. But companies with this new port of entry that they know is going in know that places like Douglas are suddenly become boom towns again. Douglas is not pretty. Douglas cannot do the Bisbee, let's do art studios and stuff like that. It has no history, so you can't have shootouts in the streets and have people pay money to see the shootouts in the streets, right? Douglas is going to boom because North America is going to boom. And this is going to make it for a really, really interesting time here in Arizona. We got a couple more stops and then we're going to wrap this whole thing up. This should just pretty much wrap up our trip. This is, we are north of Douglas. We've headed up to 191. We're headed back towards the main freeway. And this is one of the fine little aspects of the economy that's coming in down here. This is a vineyard. Apparently they do wine here. And it's interesting because they don't do wine in the middle of the week because the last two places we stopped at have been closed. I gotta see why it's pretty windy out here. But with enough agricultural know-how and enough water that's coming in, you can actually grow pretty much anything out here. We've passed various orchards. We passed some lands that were irrigated for hay, and definitely a lot of cows. So this entire valley right here, this is an agricultural valley. A lot of people don't associate Arizona with agriculture, but it's been here since the beginning, and it's going to be here well after we're gone. And here we are. So just so you guys picked up on that whole thing, my name is indeed Charles Ray Dawson. I'm the Associate Broker Residential Sales Manager of ProStar Realty. This is episode 112, and I hope you enjoyed that little tour we just showed. So, yeah, it's Thursday, and I'm in a rush. I got dragged out of town for a trip, decided to turn it into a recording studio session. I have a sinus infection or something like that, so the entire left side of my head feels weird. And I have a class I am sort of kind of / hosting and attending here in an hour, so I got to get this all wrapped up. So no rest for the wicked. So there, so we're driving through Southeast, mostly just Southern, but south to the Southeast, South by Southeast, and of Arizona, and doing these little shots. And every time I was setting a shot up, I had in my brain what I was going to say. And then there's what actually I got to say. Just like I had how I was going to do this recording from home, because I knew I didn't have time to go into work, do my normal recording, get it out, and get to this class, that is going from 1 to 4, which is right in the middle of my recording time. But, you try to schedule these things. And so when you tell the sales rep over at the title company, I can do any day but Thursday. And she goes, oh, so you can do Thursday morning. No, I can't do Thursday morning. I can do any day but Thursday. Okay, so why don't we just do this from 1 to 4? Can we do it on Tuesday? No, I think Thursday at 1 to 4. I love this sales rep, but she reminds me of one of my best friend's ex-wife. All right, and there's a reason why she's divorced. Just saying. I also know she's not going to listen to this podcast, so hey, I can say shit like that. Just like I can swear like that. So anyways, and then, so I got it all scheduled, no problem. And then I get hit with, oh, by the way, we're leaving town on, this week. We are? Really? Where are we going? Don't know, we're just leaving town. Oh, well, when are we going? Turns out that all the recording I was planning to do on Tuesday and Wednesday, so I could just do a quick bundle, got turned into, now I got to record, and slam it all into this 3-hour window. Am I better? Just a little. Just a little. And the funny thing is, if you sit there and you listen as I'm going through these, areas, you could really tell where I was like mad at the world. Okay, Bixby, screw that place. Or I have no idea what the hell's going on. All I know is I am on like fumes on my gas tank, listening to Google Maps, which is the worst map app ever, by the way. All right, use Waze, use something else, use a piece of paper. Google Maps suck, especially for navigation. So anyway, so we drive all the way through Bixby to get where there's supposed to be a gas station, only to find out there is no gas because the gas trucks can't even make it through. They're going through the hordes of brain-dead tourists in, their North Face, Polar Fleece outfits, looking at buildings, this and that and the other thing. And I really hate tourist traps to begin with. I really, really do. So the very concept of having to go into one to get something I need just drives me absolutely nuts. So we finally found a Conoco station, which is, if you know a certain C.W. McCall song, realize that that's where you discuss the State of the Union is down by the Conoco station. Got that, tanked up, hit the road, and did the rest of a trip. But what I was really trying to bring together on that whole trip is, the Southern Ute, Arizona has changed and will continue to change over the course of our lifetime. All right, when we started with Casa Grande, right, those people around there are about the 1400s, right? We don't know what really happened to them, right? They just disappeared. There's a lot of, Peter Zeihan is discussing this Indus River Valley civilization that had everything going for it in India back in the day. And then it just disappears, gone, right? Don't know what collapsed it, right? But something major hit it and it like got wiped out within a generation. Could be Mongols or some sort of proto-Mongol. Could have been the plague. Could have been Shiva for all we know, right? But something happened to that civilization. As things progress on, we see, going south. Casa Grande is located in this area that used to be all farming community, all right? And then light industrial, light manufacturing. And now it's starting to build up. Casa Grande is almost like the subdivision that always maybe will be one of these days. People are actually talking about how Casa Grande is going to turn, between, Tucson and Phoenix is going to turn into this one big megalopolis. All right? And it's just going to be straight houses and strip malls as far as the eye can see going down there. To do so, they're going to have to get that freeway straightened out. All right, it's not that it's bad; it's just narrow. You need to put in at least 4 more lanes in there, and something, and get the minivans off of it. Right? There's nothing worse in the world than sitting there watching a minivan pass a semi 1 mile over the speed limit while 50 people back up behind them. It's one of the reasons why I like Washington so much. You doing that, the cops will pull you over, all right, and write you a ticket because you're not even doing the speed limit. All right, you're creating a hazard. A very progressive state there, Washington. It's got some stuff going for it. So we go through Casa Grande, all right, and then we jump on this little dirt road, all right, which starts off as one of those great, the little red line on the map. Hey, this one looks like fun. Next thing you know, you're in a dirt road dodging chuck holes and cows, all right? I love that about the West. We wound up over in Mammoth, all right? It used to be a big mining community. I've been there a couple times for hunting out on the east side of town and whatnot of that. And it's, that's where we shot the, if you guys are following on the map, okay, you can see Mammoth, all right? And then and then we got the, the mining, and as the initial ores play out, you'll have, look, you pick up a rock, it's gold, awesome, all right? And then it goes to, look, we're digging through all this other stuff, we're panning and stuff. Oh, look, a little flake of gold, great, And then it gets to the point where it's like, hey, we got dirt. And in this dirt, we have 1/1000th. In fact, 1/1000th would be a hell of a return of gold per all this other crap. And we're going to throw chemicals and heating and all sorts of scientific stuff at it. So as these mines are economically viable, as the technology increases, all right, the mines can actually return to economic viability. And it gets so good at that you can actually go through the tailings piles. And for you guys, who live in the city who don't know what a tailings pile is, that's all the crap left over when you dig. All right. You can go through that and start using modern technology to pull, gold or whatever it is you're trying to get out of it in ways that you couldn't have prior. Right? So, and as the world gets bigger and everybody's economies and cost of living and everything increases, it becomes more and more valuable to get a little bit more copper out of an area, or silver, or gold. So once we went through Mammoth, right, we drove down and went through Tucson real quick, and there's never a reason to stop in Tucson, so we didn't. And, wound up out at Tombstone where we stayed the night. I could have spent an entire day wandering around Tombstone, just telling you about all the historical things going on there. I mean, it is one of those classic boom and bust towns, right? And I repeated the numbers off for the whole thing. But it eventually, the mines really did play out, was not getting the same rate of return. And it's their motto is, the town's so tough it couldn't die, because they were headed towards Ghost Town. And then they decided to start playing that tourism card, right? The gunfight at the OK Corral happened there. And actually, strangely enough, it wasn't called the gunfight at the OK Corral until Hollywood called it the OK Corral. All right. Till then, it was just Wyatt Earp shot this guy. All right. And then later on, they made movies about it, because Wyatt Earp actually, after doing his stint out here in Arizona, moved to Hollywood, California. Right, in Hollywood, California, he sat there and talked up his story, and they made a couple great, Western movies about him, and he became famous. He was like one of the original, self-promoting Hollywood stars. Think about that. Does that mean he wasn't a badass? No, the man was a badass, right? But as you learn more about that particular war going on down there, it's one of those classic examples. There was really no good guys kind of scenario. And at one point, there was just two street gangs trying to kill each other, chasing around in the desert, trying to get a situation. There was 5 of us and 3 of them. Let's go kill them. And there's, oh crap, there isn't 3 of them. There's 17 of them. Let's run like hell. Right? And until, eventually that thing all played out. At this point, I'm just going to tell you, go watch the movie Tombstone. Don't watch Wyatt Earp, watch Tombstone, all right? And you'll just... greatest movie ever made. So, when you have a large resource that is being exploited, like silver and Tombstone, you're going to get a lot of secondary industry. All right. In this case, secondary industry was sin. All right. Pick your poison. All right. We had alcohol, we had gambling, we had sex, we had everything going on. And so a whole bunch of Tombstone was not actually there to get silver out of the ground. It was to do things with the guys who had just spent 10 hours getting silver out of the ground, all right? And there's a lot of ways to take people's money. Don't believe me? Go to any military base and go just off base, all right? And look at all the little industries there, all right? From, I'm going to sell you military paraphernalia that, because you have to replace what you just lost on, on the exercise, and I'm going to sell it to you for 5 times more than what it's actually going to be worth. And oh, by the way, if you have surplus stuff, I'll buy that out of the back alleyway, right? And strip clubs and bars and all this other good stuff. So it is amazing how many major cities today, all right? I think London's one of them. It's definitely in Europe. Literally became a major city because the Roman army decided to put a semi-permanent garrison there. And then a little city built up around that to get hard-earned denarius away from, Roman soldiers. And that's the story of Tombstone. Then it dies out, and then it comes back with basically tourism industry. Then we go to Bixby. Same thing, slightly different market. All right. When you were in Tombstone, you were there because of the gunfight at the OK Corral. You were there for 6-shooters, hats, horses, America. There's actually 2 different Trump stores there that does nothing but sell Trump paraphernalia. Can you see what color Tombstone is? Now, you bounce 30 miles or so down the road and get to Bixby, and all of a sudden, you're in the land of Subarus and tofu eaters. All right? Same concept. Mine plays out. We got pretty buildings here from when we were a big mining concern. All right, let's move in a bunch of artists and whatnot, and we will sell tourism, right, to the other side of the spectrum. Let's call them the blue side of the spectrum. All right. And between the two, I find, from a simple case of being able to drive down the road without hitting somebody, all right, Tombstone's a lot easier. I think that's because they pretty much figure everybody's arms are all super polite. We're not going to start a fight with anybody. Over in, Bigby, where if you hit somebody, the odds are they're a lawyer, all right, and they're going to sue you. So, little political rant there. So from there, we went down to Douglas, which is right on the border. And Douglas is, out of the three, all right, Douglas has also taken a real serious hit because they used to have the smelter down there in Douglas. And the job of that smelter was to take all that mine ore out of the mountains and melt it down into copper, silver, whatever ingots, right, and then ship it off somewhere to get turned into something useful. Right? When those mines played out and everything else, that smelter eventually shut down. So it's not a ghost town, right? But it's definitely sitting, and it's not yet pining for the fjords, all right? But it's definitely on the way down. Right? But I was able to sit there and talk to a couple of people there, including a guy who worked for the city. Right? He's part of their planning commission, everything like, great guy. And we sat and we chatted in the visitor center for probably about a good 30 minutes or so. They are putting a new port of entry down on the border. Right? It's going to be about 4 miles to the west of Douglas. And then that is going to be strictly for commercial traffic. And that commercial traffic is going to pass through the port of entry. They're going to have the high-speed x-ray machines and bomb-sniffing dogs and this and that and the other thing, and, you know, customs agents and this and that. And those trucks are going to be able to pass through that port and drive directly to wherever that load needs to go. Right? Now, I noticed when I told you they're in Douglas, they actually have one of those shipping and handling centers down there, where they can take a truck, bring it across, break the payload down in these little irrespective little groups, and then ship it off to where it needs to be out of there. Right? And that's part of the industry that they got going on down there. Putting in this new commercial side means that there's going to be more people who are going to be routing their traffic, you know, into the U.S. and through on to Canada through Douglas, which makes that a really interesting part of town. They have a lot of hopes going on. Basically, what they need now is they need investors. They have an industrial site that they're putting in there for a lot of light industry. Sometimes it's cheaper and more efficient to have things made in Mexico than brought over the border and have it created, assembled right there, 500 yards away from Mexico. Slap that Made in America sticker on it, and you shoot that sucker off north or whatever. That's what the angle that they're going. There is actually, I can't remember where, but somewhere in the Canadian border, there is like 100-yard railway. Right? And the purpose of this railway is it crosses the border because there is some stupid tariff, right, that says we don't tariff products if it's made in Canada and then railed to the U.S. But we do if it comes over by truck. So what they do is they've created the shortest railway in the world, and it's literally to sit there, put the pallet on this side, on the Canadian side, you rail it across the border, you take it off, you put it on the truck, and then you're going to save 5 cents a load. Right? Tariffs, gotta love them. Yeah, I'm here on tariffs. Depends on who they're against, you know? Or if my industry is directly impacted, because I'm an American, that's how we think, you know? Does it affect me? It sucks. If it affects you, I love it. I'm going to vote for more of that. So that's what's going on in Douglas. And then the final step we did as we drive north is because there is water out there. Right? And this is the final thing that, the chapter that I was just finishing up at Peter Zeihan as I was driving through an example he was talking about is agriculture. Now, Arizona is a desert. Right? That means we got dirt and not much else. We got dirt and sun. Well, that's actually 2 of the 4 things you need to grow crops. You need dirt, right? You need the sun. You also need water. And the 4th thing you need is fertilizer and nutrients. All right, so we got 2 out of the 4. Well, guess what? We've got a pretty good irrigation system going on down there. We have an aquifer we can tap in. So that handles the water to a certain amount, right? That means that we can do low water crops. Right? And the last thing we need is nutrients in there. And you can make that out of thin air. Right? Nitrogen fertilizer can be made out of literally sucking the nitrogen out of the air. Right? There's also fertilizers that you need. You need potash and nitrogen, potash or potassium or phosphates. And I can't remember what the third one is. Anyways, all these things can get created now. Unfortunately, some of the major suppliers of fertilizers currently are in the middle of a war zone. Russia and Ukraine
are two of the largest fertilizer manufacturing companies, and now they're not coming out. Right? So whether or not that area north of Douglas is going to be able to continue on with the agriculture as they are now with this is going to be really, really interesting. Because right now, like I said, we saw grapes. All right. We have wineries down there. It would have been really nice to have the wineries open, but they weren't actually open. These, all right, to the west of Sierra Vista, there's a couple Vikings who have settled there, and they're like making meaderies. All right. For mead, all right, you need honey. All right, which means you need bees. Okay, and what can bees come off of? Bees can actually feed off of clover. Clover can then be harvested and resold as animal feed. Clover is also nitrogen fixing. You start to see how this whole thing works out? Now, once upon a time, a not very smart man said something about it's easy to be a farmer. You just throw seeds on the ground and food grows up. Yeah, that's a typical example of some Easterner or somebody who lives in the city who does not know how scientifically intensive modern day farming is. All right, so if you hear a guy say something like that, don't vote for him. All right. Vote for somebody who understands how the world works, or at least understands he doesn't understand how the world works, right? But as the fertilizer inputs start getting more expensive, and as the water start becoming more expensive, we start having more water issues, is that area still going to be viable for, agriculture? Don't know. Is the use of that water going to be more useful to be put into housing, meaning having people there living and drinking and bathing in that water, and then they're working off something, building something else? These are new economic viabilities. And these are questions that the entire West is trying to work out right now. So that's part of, that was my great southeastern Arizona tour. All right, 20 minutes in, and I haven't even gotten to Tina, because Tina dropped the podcast today, and that's one of the reasons why I'm late getting this started. And she had a lot. I had not had a chance to listen to Tina for about the last 3 weeks or so. So I'm going to hit a whole bunch of stuff really quick, really fast. So stand by, all right? Okay, let's start with the obvious stuff. Here are the numbers for March 22nd, 2023. Actives this week are 14,046, down 228. New listings are 1,842, up 68. Contracts last week were 2,520, up 33, and closings were 1,687. Coming soon to an MLS near you is 605 new listings. Our Cromford Report supply numbers are at 61.9, still trending down. Our demand is at 83, which is actually a little bit less than before, and we'll talk about that in a second. But we have a Cromford Report number of 134.1. Following up on our cities areas like this, we are still looking at Chandler leading the list, okay? And Tempe and Paradise Valley are still settling downwards. We are in a seller's market in pretty much everything except for Surprise and Goodyear, which is currently in a balanced market. Actually, check fire on that. Goodyear is actually at a very, very, very small buyer's market. Excellent. So Surprise are only balanced out there. Surprise. Queen Creek, Maricopa, and Buckeye are your value propositions, right? Those are the ones that are still in definitely in a buyer's market, right? So, interesting thing, Chandler, Gilbert, Peoria, look at these guys up here. They're the ones, there's Gilbert, there's Chandler, there's Peoria. These are the ones with the highest change towards the seller side, and that is because the semiconductor plants are getting finished out there. New jobs are starting to come in, and that means more people want to live close to these areas. That's the big question that I've always been asking. What's going on? I asked the question, Tina had the answer. Right? So that answers that question. We still have people moving in. We have jobs moving in. We got all this stuff kicking off. A good chunk, and just because she is my patron saint, Tina of the real estate, a good chunk of her beginning was talking about these guys right here, the YouTube stars, the doom and gloomers, the doom scrollers, right? The fear trolls, people who have made their entire business around pitching the fact that we are going to have a housing crash. And some of you guys might recognize some of these screenshots, right? Because she went through all of these guys talking about their little, oh, this is terrible and horrible and why it's not a horrifying scenario in the crash of 2023, the next meltdown, it's going to be a 70% drop. All right. And then going on to more YouTube housing crash. Like I said, you might recognize this guy right here. Seriously, if you ever start seeing me do the little intro screens with my face making some stupid expression and stuff like that, you are allowed to have that intervention. That's when we have to intervene on Ray, because he's finally sold out to the machine. All right. Long story short, all right, she breaks down quite simple, quite elegantly, using things that we call numbers and facts to explain why even Goldman Sachs is wrong, because Goldman Sachs writes articles down here in January, all right, and does not take in any account the reason why Phoenix housing market could crash. It was just some mouth breather journalist who had to get 1,500 words of copy out, right, to keep their editor happy before they kicked off back to the wine bar. Right. In fact, since the beginning of this year, we were up 5%. And that's not in sales. That's 5% in price per square foot. All right, we're trending back up. And ultimately, looking at our new listings, all right, we are still incredibly low inventory. We have less new listings coming on than this time last year. Now, does that mean we have the same amount of listings? No, we don't. All right, because remember, it's a pull. All right, remember what we're looking at here, guys. Let me put the big screen on. Think of it as your bathtub. New listings coming in is water coming out of the faucet. Houses being sold are water leaving. All right. Back last year, okay, we had a big gaping hole in the bottom of the bathtub, and anything that poured in went right out through. Right. Now that hole's a lot smaller, right, and it actually got plugged up there for a time, all right, allowing the bathtub level to rise. But now water's coming in at half the rate it did last year, right? But it is still leaving at a greater rate than before, right? It's going to take us a very, very long time, all right, for us to see this number right here, right, work its way back down. It's going down about 200, 100 or so, every week, okay, because new listings coming on are not coming on as fast as they used to. But the contracts are still burning them out. All right? That's why we've been seeing negative since October. All right? What else do we have going on? Okay, we have the fourth lowest. We have less listings on the MLS right now than we did back in 2019, during the COVID craziness, which kicked off this time back in 2019. 2020? No, in 2019 we have. All right, less inventory than we did back in 2019. We have the fourth lowest inventory this month, as we have over the last 18 years, month to month, year to year, calculated. All right, back in 2008, we had 56,000 listings out there. That would be double what we should have normally. All right. So another thing, these people kind of like to tweak out about and stuff like that is. They start talking about pre-foreclosures, and they compare, pre-foreclosures have gone up so much. All right? And yeah, we have 321 pre-foreclosures. Now, compared to last year, in 2022, we had 325. So we actually have 4 less. But they don't tell you that. What they do is they look back there to 2021, and they compare to that number. All right? And that number, we were talking about forbearances. Remember forebears? Scroll back. I got episodes talking about forebears back there. All right. So they're comparing, the amount of pre-foreclosures that we have currently. All right, with the time where we literally didn't have any because the federal government was making it illegal to have it. All right, that's what these YouTube people do. All right. For those people who didn't want to know how many houses were foreclosed on in the month of February, the grand total was 34. All right, out of all the houses here in Maricopa County, 34 of them went to foreclosure, and I guarantee you a substantial amount of those were reverse mortgages that did not have heirs, or the heirs could not be contacted with, or the heirs just did not realize how real estate worked. Right? They should have called Ray. So rental supply is also starting to trend back down, which means our rates are, we're not going to get our, you're going to see the rates starting to move back up. Your lease payments, your rent. All right, and she's projecting out another 3 more months of inflation. All right, just based on how they calculate inflation. And that was a 10-minute conversation. A couple other things look like FHA, for some reason, is the game to play. FHAs have actually seemed to be the lowest interest rate we have out there right now, by a sizable chunk, almost 3/4 of a point. And when you, all right, and today's numbers were at 5.72 nationally, which means if you're doing a 2-1 buy down, you can actually get that down into 3% for the first year. Talk to your lender, figure out how to do that. And they also lowered the MRI rate on FHA loans to be also from 85 basis points to 55 basis points annually. So that's something else you can look into. So long story short, all right, I have 30 minutes to get this thing in the can and start to get it uploaded, so I'm going to cut out now. Thank you very much for watching my show. You know the routine, all right? Watch your pets and children around the water. Do not drive into any flooded washes. Right? There's a lot of washes on my trip. All of them had signs that says, do not drive in here if flooded. Have a great weekend, work your circles, and I'll talk to you guys.